Malls became this super epitome of real estate development. Like, you were not a real developer until you developed a mall. And was it over 1 million square feet, right? It was all that was the thing that, made you a man in real estate back in like the 1990s, right? And then all of a sudden, well, that didn't work very well.
On today's show, we sit down with Joshua Harris, Senior Vice President at Crossmark Services, to explore evolution of retail, the so-called death of the mall, and why creativity, not just capital, drives real estate success. Josh shares insights on office space innovations, market trends, advice for young professionals entering the industry. Take it away, Nathan.
Josh, thanks for sitting down with us today. Excited to have you here on our portable podcast table here at ICSC, which is obviously a big part of all of our lives in commercial real estate. I'm going to give you one softball question, then we'll dive in. So what's the app that Josh Harris opens up first thing in the morning?
Wow, the app I open up first thing in the morning.
Yeah, what's the first app?
I think it's a CNBC app. I got to see what the market has moved. And I'm not like a big stock trader, but I just want to see if something bad happened, I would see it in the futures right there. I got to look at interest rates. So
okay.
I do that a lot.
Does that influence your day?
Not really. That's the funny part. I'm actually very, I have a PhD in finance, so in the side of it, like maybe if it's actually a really big down days here, you want some investment advice, buy when it's red, sell when it's green, right? That's all you need to know. But really just hold long term. But in a weird way, I like to let the market speak, right? So, the headlines, if I were to open up like a news app, they could tell you what they think is important.
Yeah.
There's no evidence it's actually what's important. So,
or it's only important if that's what sells their business.
Well,
not
what's important for 5 minutes till something else happens.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Correct. Well, one of the fun conversations we started randomly at a meeting, we were talking about the death of the mall. And we'll get in. I absolutely want to get financial outlook stuff. I want to get to that today. But the death of the mall and the role that we played collectively in commercial real estate. So share with the audience your theory that you shared with me on how the mall died.
So, malls became this super epitome of real estate development. Like, you were not a real developer until you developed a mall. And was it over 1 million square feet, right? It was all that was the thing that, made you a man in real estate back in like the 1990s, right? And then all of a sudden, well, that didn't work very well. And this thing called Amazon came up. And the truth is, a mall is probably a really good piece of real estate. You can walk around. It's kind of pro-social. I know I grew up going to the mall, social. I'm expecting, I don't know what kids do these days. Do you say, hey, Mom, can you take me to the power center? I just don't quite see it, right? And I think that the reality is, what really did it is we created malls into these ultimate kind of they were fortress malls, that phrase, and we had super high credit tenants. We did all the sort of, financialization. And when all the big tenants said, well, I don't want to sign, 15-year leases and all these things, they kind of imploded on themselves because they couldn't release them. And then that created this like whole death spiral thing. And truth is, if you just turn them into more like neighborhood street centers and you let in more like small business tenants, I think, and I've seen some examples of that where a lot of malls have sort of recovered or become even more themed, maybe more an ethnic theme if that goes with the demographics. So I think the death of the mall was the death of the creativity of real estate developers and owners, and maybe a little too much adherence to the banks. And I love banks, but they shouldn't run your deal.
So you threw out a term, fortress mall. Is that
it's an old term?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So was that fortress based on the tenants that you landed and the lease terms that you were able to lock in for extended periods of time?
It was a belief, at least, that because this mall was so high quality in its location, that you would always have it filled with the best tenants, whoever the latest and greatest was, right? Maybe Orange Julius, if you remember back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Our younger listeners or viewers have no idea what I said. But the theory was it's a really strong location, and like from an investment standpoint, it was a fortress. It was going to be protected. It's kind of our view of super class A, right? Which we've maybe seen with big warehouse deals now. We still, grocery anchored is interestingly. Grocery anchored has probably picked up a little bit that because people make people got to always get eaten. Now that's actually a pretty good thesis, and I have to agree with it, right?
Yeah.
But malls had this strong belief about it, and it began when the big credit tenants like the Gap or the Victoria's Secret, all these things started going out. They wanted to enter into the big open air centers. Wait a minute, there was no one to backfill them, and I just have to think the mall leadership or mall management or leasing just didn't react fast enough, and they should have put in the small local sports card vendor who they were turning away and all these things, and they got really, I will say, full of themselves. They had leasing terms that were tough. They were like leasing in a mall. It used to be like an airport. They were going to tax you with percentage rents and all these things. So I like to think there'll be a comeback, but we'll see. And then we may end up tearing them down to build apartments and other stuff before we,
Yeah, we've got a few that we've been in conversations with. If I told you the malls, you would know them and you would know their struggles. And I think what you've identified really,
we're working on some. I don't want to use the name on.
Yes,
but
yes, I think it is interesting to see that redevelopment. But I think you're right. There is hope.
Right.
So Beth Azor is here, sitting here across from me a little bit earlier today. And the work that she's done in my hometown of Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
So she was up there, and what she did was she was hired to just basically put some pop-up shops together so that Cleveland didn't look bad when the NBA All-Star game was there. And she wound up knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
But how she did that was she found some small. She wasn't out there trying to land the whale.
Right.
She just found some great fish to fill that place up, and it's done very, very well. So it is.
If it works
possible
in Cleveland, it can work anywhere.
Lord, if anything can work in Cleveland.
Beth Azor can make magic happen, but
yes,
she's good at that. But
yes.
But the point, there are people that want to shop.
Yes.
There are people that want to sell stuff.
Yes.
Malls is this magical set of real estate that can make it happen. They have parking. They're usually near roadways and transit systems. It's just one of those, and there's just one of those creativity failures a little bit. And I will say, when I think about, I'm not to shift gears completely, but office buildings, right?
Yeah.
If you're able to have a little bit more creativity about thinking of office as a place that people come to work and doing more short-term business and actually kind of servicing it. WeWork was a great business model. They thought themselves too much of a tech company. They should have thought themselves more of a hospitality company.
Yes.
And if you look at short-term leasing, you can actually generate, if you look at just how do I turn an office building or a mall or really any real estate into revenue-generating machine as opposed to a collection of leases, which is what we kind of did, you're going to be a lot further down the line. And I like to think we'll get there.
The services offered. Like I love our little office in Maitland and the little cafe that we have. That's generating revenue for the landlord, and it's also a great service to the tenant. I could see a world where you go, okay, instead of having to go across the street to a gym,
right?
What if it lived in a smaller
absolutely
inside of your office?
Even think office space. Now, granted, on architecture front, you guys have some specialized needs and studio and design. Like you're not like a, I don't know, am I picking an account? I'm not sure what's generic, a law firm, accounting firm, generic office user, whatever. But imagine a place where in the building you had, this is easier on the more floors you have, but you could have it on wings. I know your office in suburban Maitland there. Imagine if there were like conference rooms, even private offices that you could just go book half a day, the full day. I had this one concept when I used to work with a firm that we developed office. I said, what if we had like deep work suites, right? They were common area, and essentially you could lease out a private, because no one's putting private offices are very rare in a lot of build outs these days. But you could lease out a like half day or full day. Now it could be negotiated to where it's a cost factor on top, or maybe that's part of the lease. You get X number of credits for these things, right? Your conference rooms. And I think some developers, I've seen this a little bit be attempted where I said, well, listen, historically you may need 60,000 feet to accomplish this, but what if we did it where you really only needed 40,000 and then we had this shared amenity space, right?
Yeah.
But think about it from a revenue generating standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen some office owners or redevelopers attempt that, but the biggest challenge with it is that the banks do not like that model, right? Because wait, what's this other? If you say that in that model,
it's not locked down for
it's not
3 years,
down,
5 years, 10 years,
but I think that that's one of the challenges that we turned real estate into very financial. I think of the teaching standpoint. So
I was going to say,
yeah.
I feel like this is a great segue because you're the financial model guy.
Yep.
And so how do you communicate to the banks? I think I have a better strategy.
It's tough. I mean, to some extent, I think the winners of this are going to be those that have enough equity and a little bit of chutzpah that they can just sort of, we need a lot less proceeds from the bank, they can make it happen, right? I mean, to some extent, the victor goes to spoils who tries stuff.
Yeah.
And the groups that'll buy the vacant building and try stuff, it could fail.
Yeah.
Or they could make a ton of money,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's unfortunately part of it. I do think if you think about the Wall Street world, and look, I've had a lot of students, people would be like, it's certainly at Ford, and they want to go work for the big name firms, and they're great jobs, so and they'll end up doing it. But so many people in those firms, they don't come from doing property management or architecture or anything where they've actually kind of has to touch and feel it. They come from being investment bankers. They learn real estate on a Bloomberg terminal.
Yeah.
So they don't really know what it means to rent. They don't really understand what a tenant's doing. It's just like little blips on a screen.
Yeah.
Well, that's not quite how it plays out. And
Yeah.
I think we've seen that through our various cycles to where, maybe you should know real estate to invest in it. And
You should have a little bit better understanding of the big picture. So
I would.
Heather Morass, attorney,
Yep, I
she
know her.
said one of the benefits of coming to ICSC was at different points in her career,
Yeah.
somebody kind of showed her what it was like to sit across the table from a tenant and actually work to get so that they could sell stuff.
Yeah.
And so seeing the big picture and what some of their stresses are and what some of it, it's because it's one thing to lock yourself in a room and read an 80-page lease, right, and dissect the language.
God bless those who do.
Yes, more power to them.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to go, all right, what is the outcome that we're really trying to get with this, and how much of this matters and how much of it doesn't.
Yeah.
So in the financial world, what do you feel like some of the biggest obstacles that are facing our industry right now? I think you and I have talked about it. How sustainable is $50 a square foot for the TJXs of the world?
Yeah.
And how many $10 dresses do you have to sell? Those are the things.
I mean, when I look at the receipts from my wife, I feel like these guys are, they must be fortress stores in their own right. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
What's interesting about retail, and this is something, obviously, since you guys being architects, you're in the active business of trying to change this, but we've actually really underbuilt retail in a lot of locations.
Oh, I agree.
And we've,
Please bring more to us, Josh. We'd love to build
true,
this.
Though,
Yeah.
that we've actually, when you look at some, even apartments, which is probably the most supply expansion in the last 15 years, we take about 2010, and now we're midway through this decade. Retail, very little. Office, very little. Even industrials had some decent, obviously we've had to build some Amazon warehouses out and around the various parts of the country, but people want to shop. I think the online e-commerce sort of thing has found a lot more equilibrium, including the whole site to store model. So I think it's more activity based. You also seeing a very big resurgence in small business. I think one of the things that's interesting is all these surveys. We're talking about institutional trust. You may hear about people don't trust the media or Congress. I mean, why would they, right? When Gallup does these studies, so they'd ask about all these institutions. The one set of institutions that has consistently had very high trust rankings, basically from the beginning of these surveys back in the 70s through today, is small business.
Wow.
Right? People don't, not that people don't want to go eat at a chain restaurant or that they're, averse to shopping at a big store, whether that's as big as like a Walmart or something of like a boutique in a lifestyle center. But people do like small businesses, and generally there is that love, that feel and touch. And I think that the more you can integrate them, look, obviously you look at a Publix center, right? I mean, they will have a variety. They're not going to all have national tenants, and that's part of the vibrancy of the center.
And that's
Publix,
probably a good thing.
And if you talk to Publix, even that's what they want. They want a vibrant ecosystem, right?
Yes.
And I think that retail does a good job of that when people think about it from the right scale. And I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic that we're still getting pretty good at this.
Yeah,
as a country.
there's hope.
There is.
What sort of room do we have? You mentioned we're underbuilt. What do we currently have available in the greater, say, Orlando metro market right now?
what do we have available? Well, I know we're working on some projects up in the land. We got some stuff. Come check us out at Crossmark for our current development.
There you go.
Away from I do think that in Orlando, so I have this interesting project. Maybe this will be for a longer about the 30-minute cities. I'm writing a whole book on this. And one of the theories that our drive times, right? We kind of we're a very we are a car-dependent country society. Things that are within our kind of close in sphere, which is basically about 30 minutes each way. We don't really want to commute beyond this. And when we're forced to do that, right, we lose quality of life fast. And I think that for Orlando, we still have sort of developable zones within our kind of 30-minute core, which, if you think about downtown Orlando as kind of the centroid, which is not a great centroid because we have you guys are in Maitland, right? Those are we're kind of spread out. But if you go all the way out to say certainly when the Winter Garden boundary, kind of where 429 and the Turnpike come across, certainly to the east you get the 417 and Oviedo, and now obviously you got Lake Nona. They're all kind of within a kind of our boundary, and we still have a lot of infill that probably needs to come in for just to support those homes that are being built. We probably will upzone. I look at a lot of the. I'll give you a good example, and if anybody wants to work on something like this, call me up, call you guys up and down a road like Colonial, right? We got these massive, big, kind of old, somewhat dumpy-looking centers. That whole area should be upzoned for apartments, mixed use, and density, and should really. Can support it because we need a ton more housing. We need to modernize the retail, and there's a lot of opportunity for that.
We have some great corridors, which I think originally I intended an aspect of this session here at ICSC to be about the Vision 2050.
Oh yeah.
Well, I really obviously
how's that working out?
It obviously fell flat when it got to state, but I think whether or not. A lot of developers I talk to, there's some concern. You can get to a point where the annexations go crazy, or the first time you don't have a buy right that gets challenged, and you can't just go, this is what the code says, I'm going to do it. First time something like that falls apart, forget it. You can throw away the whole thing. But generally, a lot of the developers they like the idea. Now, where it broke down was the negotiation with the tenants.
Yep.
Because there was a lot of developers I talked to that said, you know what, we're on board for adding density.
Right.
We feel like on some levels we need to bring multiple sectors to a site to make it pen out anymore. But I got to talk to those tenants that are really used to having their own box.
Yep.
Nobody on their roof. All of those different things. So share with us so how does that help us when we're talking about corridors like Colonial?
Sure.
How does that play out? Because all of a sudden I don't know that the answer is just putting another single story, right, retail center in there.
It's an interesting question. I think for one thing, my advice to say the cities and counties and so forth, be flexible and common sense, right? Don't just, saying no doesn't mean you get the thing you want. And there's a lot of stuff that's, dare say, entering blighted condition. This is not essential. This is a nationwide thing, because nobody knows how to say yes, and that's a problem. If you're a developer, you stand to benefit by taking some risk, but you also have to sustain the risk. So the developer has to be smart about the risk, and you don't do you're not doing anybody favors by pushing something and having it ultimately fail, and it becomes a sort of the cause celeb against future developments. Yeah. The tenants, I will say, risk-taking by tenants for sort of more urbanistic sites or doing stuff that they're not used to is something to try. And I'm probably using Publix more because, at least in my eyesight, there's a whole bunch of Publix signs for the booth behind us.
We have association. We're guilty by saying
and obviously we all know and love Publix here. Yes. And certainly if you're in Florida, right?
Yes.
Publix has an interesting set of urban core stores that are in mixed-use buildings where parking is detached, and they even have they have the escalators that move the carts.
And some of them are the best performing stores in their chain.
And they know it. And so Publix, they realize people want to eat in these areas. There's people, right? They want to. We don't want somebody else coming in there and being a competitor. We want to service the community, right? And they serve. And I think I think my point is that I think tenants need to be, and look, I will tell you, this is where architects are very useful and needed.
Whoa, hey,
Right, yeah.
thanks for helping us.
It is, but
Yeah.
you seriously, like, design it, show the flow. And actually,
Yeah.
in fact, where I've seen some of the failures on that, where that developer to tenant, when it talks about urban corridor, is when the developer is sort of jamming a design that is to maximize the developer's pro forma and their
Yes.
space, and they're not listening. Like, tenants are very smart, and they can look at this. They look at a million site plans a day, right? Work with the tenant, engage them early, get them show them the demographics, show them the market. That's my specialty.
That's
right? This is the market. This is why you want to be here. Design into the concept, right? And that is.
And sometimes
that's
I don't
it.
know that it can't always be hung up on all the dollars on the front end,
Right.
because I think there is value in that opportunity cost if you get the right product
Yes.
there. Obviously we started this conversation with malls. We put the wrong product there, right? Didn't go so well.
Right.
But when you put the right product in the
Well,
right
we had
place,
the right product, but then we didn't shift when the tenant trends
Yes.
shifted. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna close out one last question for Professor Josh.
Oh boy.
So we're a lot of college students. I'm looking over your shoulder right now. I see some wonderful college students just getting started in this. They still got the wingtip shoes. They're gonna have probably some blisters tomorrow, and they're gonna go, I got to make a better choice. But what's the best piece of advice you can give a young college person entering into this industry?
So I've taught college students since about 2008, and when I was very young myself at UCF in the PhD program, some of those students that came out in what was one of the worst economies, real estate markets that maybe any of us will remember in our waking lives. Hopefully, right?
Yes.
I mean, and we're both young enough, we don't know, right? But those students, they've had the most time in the market, are some of the wealthiest, most successful, and done great as a cohort. So don't be afraid of the market. In fact, I think sometimes you can be blessed to start in difficult periods. Be creative. Don't have to get, I have to be, like, I'm not sure if I'm picking on my New York type students, but I have to be an analyst at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, or my mom won't love me, or something like this.
I'm getting disowned.
Come on.
Yeah.
Look at, going into unique fields, like going to leasing, going into site selection, or, finding stuff that's going into appraisal, right? There's all these other professions that are interesting. You gotta just do real stuff and hopefully a legit place. You can always shift. The chances are that first job is not your last job.
Yeah.
Get good experiences, learn stuff, and just don't worry. Like, the amount of students I've literally had who have, like, professing to me that they're about to have, like, their entire career is going to be somehow ruined because something didn't go their way when they were 22. And it's like, buddy, nothing's going to happen.
No, it's a marathon.
I think I even will say, like, until you turn 25, don't expect anyone to fully respect you. And somewhere you're going to get a job. You think maybe you're capable of, like, running big major deals. They're going to look at you and think you're not even competent enough to turn on the copy machine. And the truth is somewhere in between.
Yes.
Be humble about it and just do your thing. And that's honestly my best advice, is just to, like, just get out there and it'll figure itself out.
Well, that's great advice, Professor Josh. Thanks for taking a few minutes.
My pleasure.
Appreciate being able to highlight some friends of ours in the industry.
Yep.
And glad to be working with you, obviously, on some projects.
Yep.
But even if we weren't, our goal here today is to shine some light on some people we enjoy working with
Same
and
here.
spending time with. So thanks for sitting down.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.